Hello and welcome back to another episode of Injustice For All MMA. My name is David, and this episode is for UFC 296, Edwards versus Covington. Let's start off with the fact that this pay-per-view started off really well in terms of the early prelims, the prelims, and then progressively kind of died once it got to the main event. So, we start off with Buday and Gaziev. And once we trickle down to the main event, it just progressively gets, things just didn't go the way I thought they would go. And not in terms of who I wanted to win, obviously. That's a separate thing. But just in terms of the excitement. The prelims were stacked, were loaded, were amazing. And then, I think I've said this like 3 times now, the main event slowly dissipated. Let's start off with the scorecards, and then we'll get into the narratives, right? So, honorable mentions. No one got robbed. There's some decisions that I kind of don't like, but no one got robbed. Let's start off with Buday versus Gaziev. Gaziev wins by TKO in the second round. This fight is basically Gaziev just hitting Buday and Buday covering up. That's pretty much the theme of this fight. In the first round, Gaziev outstrikes Buday by about like 20 plus strikes, and he has a takedown. He had a ground and pound too, as well in that first round. You could argue a possible 10-8. I don't think Buday landed more than 3 to 5 strikes, and he covered up the entire round. You could argue a 10-8 here. I don't think a judge gave a 10-8, but you can argue... Oh, I'm wrong. All 3 judges gave a 10-8. okay, there we go. Adelaide Bird, Eric Colon, and Jacob Montalvo. I give a 10-9. All 3 judges gave a 10-8, so they saw what I kind of saw, but I didn't give a 10-8. All of them gave a 10-8, so there's that. In the second round, Gaziev finished it, and that's where you get that. You go to the next honorable mention. All right, and you have Aldana versus Rosa. I think Rosa should have got the decision here. This is like the second time now that I feel like Rosa should have got the decision. She should have got the decision here. She should have got the decision against Norma Dumont. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just the fact that she's getting out. I can't remember the first fight. I can't remember the Norma fight in its entirety at the moment, so I'll just stick with this fight. But maybe it's just the fact that in combination with Aldana's pressure and her mostly hitting Rosa's head instead of her leg, and the fact that Rosa is, in my opinion, outstriking her in in particular the second round. I feel like she outstruck her slightly, and then in the third round, where I definitely think she outstruck her, it's mostly all leg kicks. I think it's just the optics of, okay, this girl's hitting you in the head, this girl's hitting you in the leg. Which one are we going to decide is more impactful, in conjunction with Aldana just going forward in the second and the third round? It's just a bad optical look for Rosa. Even though I think, personally, Rosa won this fight. So let's start off with the top, right? I had this 29-28 for Rosa. First round for Rosa, last round for Rosa, second round for Aldana. I put a close marker on the second and the third round, if we're just going to be honest. You can argue the third round for either person. You can argue the second round for either person, so the scorecards could kind of be all over the place here. But a 29-28 is obviously the acceptable one, is the one that I think most people would agree with. You go to that first round. Rosa outstrikes Aldana by about 25 plus strikes. Okay, mostly leg kicks, but she outstrikes her clear. I'm talking clear. Not enough for a 10-8 in my opinion. It's rare that you'll see that, but it's clear. This round is not up for debate or contention. You go to the second round, where it's close on strikes with the edge to Aldana. I will say, even though I gave it to Aldana, I still felt as though, first of all, Rosa was up on strikes, and I want to say in that first half of that second round, and then the last half, while Aldana is pushing the pace and she's striking her, it's not as though it's one-sided. She's striking her, and then Rosa's still returning fire. Rosa's still landing back. And then the tally comes up, the unofficial scorecard, the unofficial strike numbers, and they pitch it as close. It is kind of close, but it's, in my opinion, I personally think that Rosa won this round. But again, I put a close marker, I gave it to Aldana. Third round, I'm even more strong on this fact that, again, it's close on the feet with the edge to Rosa. Rosa's outstriking her in the first half of this third round as well. And then Aldana puts it on again. The thing is, while Aldana's putting it on, Rosa's still attacking. And both of their faces are bloody. This is weird where I feel like you can argue this for either person. But the problem is, Rosa still, it's not as though Rosa was, it's not as though this is the case where Rosa's beating her in the first half of the third round and then takes off in that last half. No, she beats her in the first part of that third round, and then they're both trading. It's back and forth. It's not, even the commentator who, there's a part in this fight where DC says, hey, Aldana's winning the second round. And I'm like, no, hold on. It's too early in the second round for him to even declare that. But the problem I have is, Aldana's going forward in the third round. She's striking her. Rosa's returning fight. They're both landing on each other equally in conjunction with Rosa winning the first half of that third round. So this should be 29-28 Rosa. I was suspecting a split decision. I swear to the Lord, I was so mad tonight because there's another decision right after this that pissed me off. There's always this thing where there's these fights that are kind of close, kind of back and forth, and you're expecting a split decision. You're expecting a split decision, and whoever it falls, and you can complain about it, but you're not spitting robbery, and I'm not spitting robbery on this or the next fight. But I was expecting a 29-28 Rosa, 29-28 Aldana. The fact that I saw a 29-28 UD, these guys are too clicked in on whatever narrative they have on this fight, and I don't like that. Next honorable mention, Menifield versus Jacoby. Hey, this 29-28 for Jacoby. You can argue this either way, and I'll explain in a second. The first two rounds for Jacoby, last round for Menifield. Close marker on the second round, I'll explain in a second. First round, Jacoby outstrikes Menifield. Pretty clear, that round is enough for contention. Second round, it's close on strikes. They're kind of even on strikes, but Jacoby, it's close on strikes. Jacoby definitely outstrikes Menifield. Here's the issue. There's a weird optical thing here. Menifield stuns Jacoby twice. Where, when I say stun, I mean it's visibly, it's plain to see that Jacoby jolts. He does I don't want to say he does a full chicken leg, but he does a slight jolt to where it's like, oh, he stunned him, right? The problem I have with this is, despite Jacoby still outstriking him, Menifield does the same thing. It's just not super noticeable. There was many jabs, in particular one jab that happened in the second round that stuns Menifield, but Menifield, I don't know, hides it better. He gets stunned and he jolts back. His body does the sort of, not chicken dance, sort of worm-like thing where your body kind of goes in and out, but his body just looks like he just got hit by a jab, instead of Jacoby where he does it and there's a huge reaction to it. If we're just going by the same rules here, Jacoby should have won this round. It's close, but he should have won this round. You go to the third round, Jacoby barely outstrikes Menifield on the feet, but gets dropped and taken down. So this, again, automatically goes to Menifield. You go to the judges' scorecards, and you're going to see something just totally different. And that is, Almeida has the last two rounds for Menifield. Chris Lee, last two rounds for Menifield. Same thing, Tony Weeks, last two rounds for Menifield. All have a 29-20 for Menifield. So that's where you get that. Can't really complain. That's just how it is. I skipped over the Aldana versus Rosa fight, and all their scorecards are pretty much the same. They give the last two, Derek Cleary, Ron McCarthy, and Jacob Montalvo, all give the last two rounds to Irina Aldana. So, again, can't complain about these two decisions. I had the opposite person, but it's close, and I can't complain. And I was expecting a split decision, but no, we don't get a split decision at all. We go to another honorable mention, and that is Ferguson versus Pimblett. We all knew who was going to win this fight. Pimblett wins. I had this 30-27. Very interesting how this was an interesting fight because it let me know how the judges were grading being on the ground. It was this and the Pantoja fight, but I guess we'll get to the Pantoja fight, whatever. I had a close marker on the third round. You can argue Ferguson won the third round. Okay, in that very first round, not Pantoja, Jesus. Pimblett outstrikes Ferguson, and he drops him. Okay, and he has some ground and pound. Am I reading off the right list? I am reading off the right. Okay, there we go. And he drops him as well with some ground and pound. You go to the second round. Okay, Pimblett has some ground and pound for about 3+ minutes. Ferguson is kind of active on the bottom. And then in the third round, Pimblett has a takedown. He has a takedown, and he has some to decent ground and pound. But Ferguson was very active. So active to where I think you could kind of argue that, you know, he could win this round. But I guess the issue is that he's on his back the entire time, and it wasn't super significant enough ground and pound for him to steal this round. You go to the judges' scorecards, and I want to say all three have it the same way, 30-27. Derek Cleary, Saul Diamante, Junichiro Kamijo for Paddy Pimblett. You go to the next honorable mention, and I think this one was the one that kind of ticked me off a little bit. Pantoja versus Royval. I had this 49-46 for Pantoja. I give the third round to Royval, but a close mark on the fourth round. You can kind of argue the fourth round could go to Royval. In the end, I don't think Royval wins this fight, but you could maybe argue a 48-47 for Pantoja, but I had it 49-46, obviously. You go to the first round. Okay, you go to the first round. If I can find it. You go to the first round. Pantoja is outstriking Royval on the feet. He also has a takedown with some ground and pound. Royval I mean, the whole entire fight he's active on the bottom. The problem is none of this is going to help him until in certain, because he didn't do anything on the feet. And so none of this is really going to help him. But he's very active on the bottom. You go to the second round, and Pantoja has 2 takedowns with ground and pound. While Royval's active on the bottom as well, it still doesn't matter. You go to the third round where it actually does kind of make a difference. Royval outstrikes Pantoja on the feet. He had a reversal. Pantoja has 2 takedowns, and he does almost nothing with these takedowns. Very little ground. I'm talking little to no ground and pound he does with these 2 takedowns. The takedowns are null and void in this round. And in conjunction with him giving out very little ground and pound, while Royval is on the bottom and he did work on top, and he did work on the feet, he's very, very active on bottom. And that's what wins him this third round. You go to the fourth round where it's kind of close. You can maybe argue for Royval, but Pantoja gets a takedown with a submission attempt. He has him down for 3+ minutes. And then in the last in the last minute of the round, Royval has some ground and pound to kind of close out the round. The problem is, in terms of damage and strikes, Pantoja didn't do a lick on the ground. He kind of just he really just kind of held him there. He did have the submission attempt, which is why you could give it to Pantoja, but he didn't really do much on the ground. And so you can maybe argue that for Royval, but that's being liberal with the scorecard, if you ask me. You go to the fifth round, a little back and forth, but in the end, Royval, he outstrikes Pantoja on the feet, not by much, but Pantoja gets 2 takedowns with a little bit of ground and pound. It's Pantoja's round. You go to the judges' scorecards. Eric Colon has it 49-46. Honorable mention, he doesn't give the third round to Royval. That's ridiculous. He instead gives the last round to Royval. Honorable mention, that's nonsense. You go to Junichiro Kamijo, honorable mention to him and Ron McCarthy. They give it a 50-45. That's also nonsense. Those two also don't give the third round to Royval, but it is what it is. So honorable mention to all those guys. And then the main event, there's no honorable mention here. We all have the same scorecard. 49-46, last round to Colby Covington. This fight, Sucks because we thought we were going to see grappling. Instead, it's Colby Covington who was hesitant. He basically pulled a Bilal Muhammad in the Bilal Muhammad versus Leon fight. I know that was like 2 seconds, but still, the point still stands as Colby was super hesitant. He blamed it on ring rust. It could be ring rust. That seems to be the consensus, but regardless of if it's ring rust or not, he waits until basically, if I'm looking at my notes, he waits until the 3rd round to initiate a takedown. Not initiate, but to actually fully commit to getting a takedown. Gets it. It doesn't fucking matter. He still loses all the rounds except for the 5th round where he's able to actually stay down there and control him. Listen, in the end of the day, if this were 200 rounds, Colby Covington would be champion. The same thing we said back in the same narrative that gets spun when he lost to Usman twice. If Usman wasn't the champion, Colby would be the champion. But now we know that's not fucking true. I think the new narrative should be if Colby had 28 more rounds to go, he'd be the champion. But that's not how the sport works. It's a snoozer of a main event. It's good to see Colby back because now we'll see him fight more often. But the next thing we need to see is Edwards versus Muhammad. And that's how the night ends. It starts off so high and it ended so sad and weak and just tepid. And for the first time, I actually got mad at Colby's shtick because he loses. He puts his hand up as though he won, and I know he's doing his shtick, but I was just like, man, this fight sucks so bad. I don't fucking care for your shtick right now. But then he won me back when he goes, you guys are broke bitches and fuck you. That was funny. I like that. So that's how the year ends, with an anticlimactic main event, and now we go into the new year with a rematch of a fight that should have been finished anyways, and we're gonna just see Uncle Live just beat Johnny Walker anyways. We're gonna then go to Toronto where we see I actually don't know. Drickus maybe win. I really don't know. And then we'll see a new bantamweight champion in the women's division. That's the end of it. That's all I have. Thank you all for listening. God bless. Happy New Year. Merry Christmas. And stay safe.